Hello and welcome to this presentation sponsored by the Minnesota Change Management Network. My name is Kimberlee Williams. I'm the president of the Center for Strategy Realization. We help companies build capabilities for change, and it's my privilege to be delivering this presentation to you today called The Change Leader's Guide, 7 Powerful Ways to Drive Results and Increase Your Professional Net Worth. You'll notice that this is part 1 of a 2-part webinar session. Actually, the first is a webinar. The second is an in-person session at Normandale Community College this week, Thursday, January 21st from 4 to 6. And it's not required to complete this webinar before going to the in-person course, but it does provide some context for that. So very glad you're here today and hope that you can attend on the 21st as well. So let's get started. Again, welcome to everyone. We have a large number of people on the call today and a very diverse community of disciplines, including change management, business analysts, project managers, and a large diversity of companies, including governmental agencies, education institutions, other nonprofits. So looking forward to your participation here. All attendee lines will be muted during the main presentation, and this session, obviously, you're listening to now as a recording. The downloads are going to be available in a link that I'm going to share with you momentarily, and this is a post recording of the session, so we won't have Q&A here today, but certainly if you do have questions or comments, we would love to know about them, and I'm going to provide you an email address where you can submit those. So real quickly, just a little bit about me. As I said, my organization is the Center for Strategy Realization. I have been doing strategy change and very large project work for about 20 years, predominantly in Fortune 100 companies, as well as some assignments in government. I've worked across 18 different industries, always on very large projects. I've had functional responsibility in HR, but also operations, strategy, P&L, and business development experience. And my most recent assignment before founding this company was at Merck, where I led the change execution globally in the strategy office for a very large base of employees globally. And we really worked across every functional and business area of the organization during Merck's transformation. We built a community of actually closer to 4,000, it says 3,000 here, but around 3,500 to 3,700 change agents across the globe. That wasn't their full-time job. However, they were skilled up in change and they were actively participating in all of our initiatives. And through that, we accomplished, as you can see here, a very significant cost reduction. And we also hit our revenue and our growth targets, and it enabled us to complete the integration with Schering-Plough a couple of years later. I have an IO psychology background by training, and I'm also a Lean Sigma black belt and a master change agent. And again, I have worked on a lot of projects, and so hopefully some of these will resonate with you as the kinds of projects that you're working on today. So let's get started. There really are 3 learning objectives today, and we'll follow up with 3 others that build on these in part 2 on Thursday. But the first is really to visualize the landscape of change management versus change leadership. You know, I find that many of us in this profession around strategy realization and change are looking to really grow our skill base and have impact at higher levels, and sometimes have challenges with the traditional approach of change management and are really trying to think about options. So today, what I want to share with you is sort of the big picture view to help think more strategically about the profession and where it's going and what companies need and are looking for, and where each of us individually fit within that. So we'll do an assessment around that. The second is to understand the concept, the construct of professional net worth. What exactly does it mean, and how much of it do you have? And the third is to look at 7 strategic engagement skills that you can develop that can improve your professional net worth. So if you're looking for the handouts, there are 2 ways to get there. This link may be hot, so if it is hot, you can just go ahead and click on it. But if for whatever reason you're finding this link isn't hot, you can navigate to our website, which is www.centerforsr.com. I'm going to take you there right now. And then you're going to go to resources, white papers. And underneath white papers, right in the middle, you're going to find a download that looks like this. I'm just going to click on it so you can see it real quickly. There are 2 pages in here, and you can go ahead and pull those down and print them while we are talking here, and then you can participate in the exercises that we're going to do together. All right. So with your downloads in hand, let's first talk about the first objective, which is really about, in the big landscape of change, where we are right now is that the bar is being continually raised on change capability. In other words, it's a moving target, and it's headed upwards. And when I talk about change capability, I'm talking about our individual and organizational ability to manage the people side of changes. All right, so here's a framework to help you think about that. On the first axis, we have business turbulence. So to what extent is a company experiencing changes in the market, whether it be customer, regulatory, growth opportunities? Even though those some of these things may be very positive, it may put the company in a position of having to come up with new products or services quickly, to rethink their operating model, right? To make a host of different kinds of changes internally to be able to capitalize on their opportunities. So whether your business turbulence is positive or negative is less important than the magnitude that you may be experiencing. The second axis is, what level of results are you expected to deliver? Is yours sort of a sleepy status quo organization where last year's targets aren't that much different than this year's targets? There's not many of those organizations around today, but I do occasionally run into a few of them. Or are you more moderate ground where you say, we do have some stretch targets that we are expected to achieve, but as I look at them, they look entirely reasonable to me? Are you really up here in the land of sort of aspirational results, right? You have many targets. Some are beyond stretch, right? They may be achievable, but they're really tough. These are the kinds of things that we want to consider when we think about the level of change capability that's actually needed. So let's walk through each of these, and I'll give you a sense of what I mean. So if you're in one of these organizations that's sort of low turbulence, low results, you may find yourself in an ad hoc change role, or in a company that's only looking for ad hoc change capabilities. And this is largely the land of tactics, right? Most of it is happening through communication. The people who are doing it are predominantly invisible. They hold other roles. They may be HR business partner or communication people, kind of behind the scenes. Just give me some communications and we'll get it out the door, pair of hands type folks. And again, there are some organizations who are legitimately operating here. That's it. That's all they need. But most of the time, what I'm finding is that we've got individuals and organizations who are experiencing a lot of turbulence and who are expected to deliver a lot of results, but aren't necessarily building the capability that they need to do that. These organizations they've started the journey. They recognize that they are operating in an environment of turbulence, that they've got to deliver some results. They've introduced change management into the organization. Perhaps there's a common tool set. They really are thinking about preparing the organization for success, which has positives and negatives, right? Preparing the organization sort of signals that we're taking time to do that. And oftentimes, change management is perceived as something that is slow, or something extra to do by the business. We have technical professionals. So for instance, if you have people in your company who go by the job title of change manager or something like that, right? These are the folks that we're talking about who are carrying the tools and carrying the toolkit. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, aren't necessarily getting a ton of uptake in the organization, as they're considered role players. They're the technical people. They don't necessarily speak the language of business. However, what they're providing has some value, right? But it's not as if that they are considered really business people in the organization. They're more considered role players. By the way, as I describe each of these levels for you, I'm going to use these kinds of terms, but these aren't job descriptions. These are descriptions of capability, right? So these could just as easily apply to a business line leader or a change manager or a PMO leader or a strategy office team member, okay? These are agnostic to function. Now let's think about the third level. Change execution. These organizations have started to build a more sophisticated skill set around human risks and capabilities. They have a higher level of expertise. They're more adept at providing feedback, and they're viewed as partners to the business, right? So they have a seat at the table, and they're more engaged in the language of business than folks who are further down the curve, because I think business leaders intuitively understand risks. Now, that's not to say that they're all the way there, but certainly a skill set at this level is providing more value to the organization than a skill set at this level. The next level of skill is capability, is change leadership. And here we're making, although it looks like these are just equal steps, we're taking a fairly large step between change management, change execution, and change leadership. And you can see there's a pretty significant step here, which is we're moving from tools and activities and reporting to outcomes. Right. We've made a fundamental shift in mindset around what is it that we're really trying to accomplish here. And although I think people working at this level intuitively know that executives and leadership behavior and sponsorship are so important to what we accomplish, these people actually know how to influence that. They are highly adept at getting the behaviors and the commitment that they need from their executives in order to produce the outcomes that the executives themselves say they want. And so beyond just being a partner, having a seat at the table kind of thing, this organization has people in it that have built a level of trust between themselves and other leaders that they work with, such that they are able to really influence the behaviors that delivered the desired outcomes. And finally, change acceleration. This really is about doing all the things that come before it, but being able to do it fast in a repeatable way. It's very intuitive for the organization, and it's not just reacting to what the organization needs, but it's leaders and their coaches and their business partners really initiating changes in the business, anticipating changes in the market, whether it be regulation, external opportunities, customer shifts, or the rest. These folks see themselves not in the business of operations on maintaining the business on a day-to-day basis, but they see themselves as innovators, as actively making changes in the business on a day-to-day basis. The big difference at this level is business acumen. At this level, someone who has skills in change and someone who has skills in business are virtually indistinguishable from one another. So these aren't specialists, right? These are people who have enough business skill and enough change skill to be able to very effectively and quickly drive changes in the business, and they're trusted advisors to one another, right? This is really the pinnacle of influence, that someone is accepting your advice on face value because they trust you so much. So a couple other remarks about this. Trusted advisor, I think, has been a common term that I've heard come up in the last couple of years, and I hear business partners in particular, but others in organizations saying they want to become a trusted advisor. All of us move up and down this curve each and every day. It's not about reaching this destination and arriving, but it is about making decisions about where you want to spend most of your time, and whether the work in the organization that you're at right now has the kind of work and the kind of leaders that are going to lend itself to that type of work, or whether you're going to need to do more hands-on work down here just because of your own skill set or because of the maturity level of the organization. So let's let's do an assessment and take a look at that and get a sense first where the organization is, where you're working, where they're at on this continuum, and then we'll place you within that. So first, what I'd like you to do is think about the organization or the project that you're working on now, and let's try to be really specific about that, because change capability can change if you're working on a project that has a very enlightened leader in one part of the organization, and it can change dramatically if you're working in a small corner of an organization who has a very unenlightened leader, right? So it can change, but my suggestion would be just, don't think about it across your career, across different companies. Pick a project or pick a company where you're at right now and select the level of business turbulence that you think they're experiencing. And also let's think about what results are required in that organization and strike a line there. Next, let's think about, if that's what's necessary, where are they actually? And, I don't draw the picture in this way to bias you in any way, because I really want you to think objectively about what this looks like for you. But in many organizations, I do find that the required capabilities and the actual capabilities are not the same. And so go ahead and strike a line in terms of the actual capabilities that you think the organization has. And I really think of this as the area of opportunity. Now, in rare instances, you may have an actual capability that exceeds the required. And what that says to me is, well, there still may be an area of opportunity there. If you've got more capabilities than you need, perhaps there needs to be some leaning out, or perhaps there needs to be another way to think about how to deploy those capabilities across the organization. But the question is, why do we have more than we need? That's a different area of opportunity. But for the most part, I find that organizations have some gap in this level where they need to develop a base of skills and they don't quite have enough. Next, let's think about where your capabilities fit in. Where were you mentally tracking as I was talking through these? Where were you thinking your skill sets are? And here's why this is important, because I think a lot of times, people who are leading change are among the hardest working people in business, in my opinion, because we're not going to work every day maintaining the status quo, right? We're doing some of the most difficult work of taking things to a to-be state. And that creates a lot of churn. It can create conflict and disagreements and all those kinds of things. So, we've got a lot on our plates. And sometimes I think we can lose the bigger picture. And, on those days where we really are having challenges at work and, sometimes saying to ourselves, geez, do I really even want to do this anymore? Do I want to be in this organization? Maybe I should just move and go to an organization or do a little bit different kind of work. I tell you, for me, this has a lot of explanatory power, because what you sometimes find is that when let's say the organization's capabilities exceed yours, you find yourself pedaling hard to keep up. When you have when your capabilities, let's say, are fairly far up the curve and the organization's actual capabilities are quite far down the curve, this is where you feel you're really pushing and pulling the organization along, right? And having to create a business case around why you do what you do and how it can provide value, and doing a lot of proving and providing evidence. So, this in itself can explain some of the sentiments you feel on a day-to-day basis. But it can also give you a roadmap for, hey, if I want to continue to develop myself in my field, if I really see myself doing this over the long term, and I don't want to stay here anymore, where do I go? What else is it that I need to learn? And it starts to create that roadmap, both individually and organizationally, about what are those next steps? What do you need to learn? What does that roadmap look like? Okay. So hopefully this has given you some insight into the big picture. We're not going to do a poll today. As I mentioned, this is a re-record of the initial session. But what we were finding in that poll is that the majority of people said their company required capabilities were around change leadership. The existing capabilities were, for the most part, between ad hoc and change management, sort of right around in here, around the low level of change management. And that the company's that people's individual capabilities were sort of on the upper end of change management. So they were, largely contributing their expertise to pull their company's actual capabilities closer to the required, which makes sense. Now, let's introduce the concept of professional net worth. I'm going to define this for you in a moment, but here's the basic idea. When you start moving up this curve and your skill sets are growing and you're able to make a more significant contribution to the organization, here's what happens. Your professional net worth goes up. You have more value to that organization. And when I say professional net worth, this gets to our second objective. Here's what I'm talking to. Professional net worth is a measure of your impact, influence, and income at a given point in time. Now let's break these down and talk about each of them individually. First, your impact. When I talk about impact, I mean the level of tangible value, the contribution that you're delivering in your organization. For example, if you are a project lead or a change lead on $1 million global initiative versus a $50,000 departmental project, you have a higher level of impact, right? You have a greater level of scope, you have a greater level of opportunity to impact financial realization. Now, this could include other intangibles like your credibility and your reputation for delivering that value. But really, this gets down to, how big of a thing are you capable of delivering? The second one is influence. And this is the extent to which you're able to persuade others, usually leaders, to behave in ways that get the outcomes they say they want. So this is about them, influencing them. So shaping your sponsors to exhibit the necessary behavior at exactly the right time and place to be able to deliver project outcomes. Now, their outcomes can be professional or personal. Sometimes helping leaders make their way through large, complex initiatives impacts their own work-life integration. It impacts other things that they have in mind for their career, for instance. And so this doesn't just have to be professional. It can also be personal to some extent, but it is about persuading them how to behave to get what they want. And then the last one is income. The extent to which you're able to persuade others to behave in ways that get the outcomes you want. So, for example, shaping your sponsors or leaders to provide rewards that you value. Now, these could be monetary, such as your compensation, or they could be non-monetary, things like flex time or special responsibilities you want for developmental purposes, or working remotely, or working at home, working on a different schedule, right? Other things that you value that aren't necessarily about money, but things that you value. And so influence and impact can help you attain better income. All right, so these don't work independently of one another, they work together. So let me suggest that we do this. Pull out the professional net worth assessment that you downloaded, and we'll take a couple of minutes and do this together. This is excerpted from a longer assessment, so I tried to select just a few questions in each category to kind of give you the essence of what it's talking about and get kind of a thumb in the wind sense of where you are relative to your professional net worth. So let's do the first one, impact. In your company, have you earned a wide reputation for consistently delivering major results? So I'm saying, are you working on the big stuff, or are you working on a collection of smaller things? Go ahead and rate yourself for your reputation on delivering major results. Do executives and your colleagues treat you first as a business person rather than a change manager? So in other words, the question that we're getting to here is kind of how far are you up that curve? Are you sort of seen as a role player or a technical professional, or are you seen more as a peer coach or an advisor? So are they treating you first as a business leader? Do you find that pushing your way in is no longer necessary? You really are seen as a go-to resource on big, complex initiatives, or are you having to do a lot of selling? Are you having to do a lot of work around the business case for change management, let's say, which is a really kind of a tough place to be. But this is about being objective and kind of understanding where we are. So, are you invited to deliver value on the big stuff, or are you pushing your way in? Now, let's go to influence. The first one is around politics, and I find that change leaders who are looking to drive influence in the organization are often very uncomfortable with politics. In fact, many, like me, were taught you should just be completely neutral, just ride it out, sit on the bench, do not participate, rise above it. And I have to tell you, I'm not sure that's the right, in my own work, I don't believe that that is the right way to do it. I think that there are healthy and ethical alternatives to not participating in politics. So how are you doing that? Are you really good at dealing with politics? Do you have people and resources in place to get by those political obstacles that can get in the way of effective implementation? Do senior executives in your company call on you as an objective and trustworthy advisor? So in other words, objective is in here for a reason. Are you seen as pulling an agenda along with you? This happens a lot in functional organizations, HR, IT, finance, legal, communications, because oftentimes they want to implement something that the business has concerns about. So if you're on a project like that in particular, your objectivity may be questioned as whether you're peddling something that the function wants that the business doesn't. But there's lots of other reasons that you might not be seen as objective, and it's a hard question to answer for yourself. This sometime might be something good for you to ask your executive sponsor or someone you trust on a team, because being seen as objective is a door opener. So where are you on being objective and a trustworthy advisor? From your sponsor's perspective, let's say, from your executive's perspective. This is a big one, and I find that change leaders get stuck here a lot. We use change management tools effectively, but when it comes right down to shaping the behavior that we need to get from our sponsors, sometimes we either think that we can't do it, that there are risks, and we have anxiety about that, or we don't know how. And I can tell you that oftentimes we have a lot more runway in influencing our sponsors' behavior than we think. So, do you know how to shape your sponsors' thinking and behavior to get the behaviors that you need, even when it involves asking difficult questions or having difficult conversations? Are you good headed into an environment to get what you need from your sponsor? Do you know how to do that? And then let's go to income. The recognition you receive from leaders and peers is confirming that your work is valued. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about, being called up on stage for a handshake and a round of applause, or maybe even a check. A check is always nice at the end of a big project. But other forms of recognition as well is, are you getting the pat on the back? Are you getting the little confirmations along the way that you're delivering value in the organization? And the reason I bring this up is because, to me, this is an intangible form of income that, it may only be pennies every day, but when you're in an environment in which you are not recognized and your work isn't valued, at least for me, as far as I'm concerned, that detracts nickels and pennies from my real compensation every single day. And so getting that recognition and an acknowledgement of your value is an important part of income. And the next one really is about your economic compensation, the dollars and cents. I think all of us could say that we'd like to make a little more money. This isn't about that necessarily. It's about, are you at least at the place that you think you should be relative to the market and relative to your true contribution, or do you feel like you are working on a discount? For internal change agents, lots of times they say, well, I think my compensation is, competitive to the market. But I often find that external consultants are saying, hey, I get quarterbacked in by a staffing agency. I have to work for less than I want. I feel like it puts me in a tough position, that I'm coming in sort of on a discount. And I think in general, the profession of strategy realization and change management, change leadership in particular, we sort of suffer from low value self-esteem, right? We're afraid to ask for more. We have a hard time tying our contribution to financial outcomes, and therefore we often accept what we're given. So anyway, a little editorial on that one, but is your comp where you think it should be relative to your contribution? And then finally, here's those non-monetary rewards. Are you contributing at such a high level that you can go in and ask for things that you want that may not be available to other people? I mean, this is, all of us, I think I know, this is where talent is headed in the future. The amount of peanut butter rewards that are going to be spread around across all levels of performance is going to be reallocated to higher level performers and people who are considered to be key talent. So everyone else is going to feel the pinch of those rewards being less available. And so to the extent that we can help you really be delivering, contributing at your very highest levels, you're a key talent, or you are a very strong performer, it's going to put you in a position to be able to negotiate some of those things that you want, that potentially are non-monetary, but things that are important to you. So go ahead and look across the pattern that you're seeing there. Are you want to be relative to your professional net worth? We're going to talk in a minute about sort of moving yourself up that curve and thinking about, well, where is the right place for you to be? But have a look at the patterns and maybe just check off a couple. Don't check off 5, but maybe 2, maybe 3 that you think potentially could be areas that you might want to work on in the future. So, the key here is that if you did say that your professional net worth is not where you want it to be, and you think that in your organization, or perhaps in some assignment that you have in the future, you're going to be called upon to provide this level of skills, there are things that you can do to build up your skills so that you can get there. And in fact, somebody once said to me, so is there like 1,000 competencies I need to build? Which I thought was hilarious, because for fans of competencies, yes, I know they tend to come in dozens and hundreds, but this isn't like that. This really is about, I think lean. And so to me, my job is to boil down for you, what's the minimum or the optimal that you need to build to be able to move yourself up the curve? And I've boiled that down into 7 things, and I call them strategic engagement skills. So if you want to deliver outcomes at a higher level and really be about influencing and coaching, here are the skills you need to have. Storytelling. You need to be able to crisply articulate what the outcomes are and shape it in terms of a story that will move people to action, not a data set. All right. Positioning. One of the biggest challenges that people have at this level, change management, change execution, they can't get anybody's attention. They can't get access. Even when they do, they say, well, what am I supposed to say to that sponsor? Right? They just don't necessarily have the experience or the words to say. But positioning your role is the most fundamental across all of these. If your role is not positioned properly and you don't have a working agreement with your executive as to what you're going to do and what they're going to do and what your shared approach is going to be, it is not possible for you to move further up this curve, because you're going to be doing the work by yourself. Okay. Alignment. This is about decision making and one form of decision-making in particular, which is prioritization. We all know executives that have way too many things to do. No portfolio is organized. Everyone is headed off in a variety of directions. And not only is there not enough time or money to actually do everything, people's heads in the organization are just swimming with all of this stuff. And so one way that you can have a huge amount of influence is to be better, much better, pardon me, I just advanced the slide, at helping leaders make decisions, particularly around prioritization. Facilitation is, I think I'll never find the perfect word for this particular skill. Organizations are fundamentally changing the way in which they implement. There used to be no organization, and then it was sort of heavy top-down PMO, air traffic and control. Now many organizations are moving away from that because it wasn't agile enough, and I don't mean agile with a capital A, the approach. I mean, it just was too slow-moving and bureaucratic, and so a lot of PMOs were disbanded as a result of that. And yet, we still need project teams, and they still need coordination, and we still, studies are showing, I'll share this with you in our next session together, that implementation is very much moving to a network approach in which the managers are responsible for it. So we have a role in that, and we can significantly influence how the implementation happens through networks. So facilitation is a big one. Coaching, really helping, asking the questions and helping people come to conclusions, even if we're not in the room with them. So a big part of this has to do with coaching middle-level managers through other managers and helping them with the words and the tactics. Engagement, I would say, of any of these, this is the one that is most, I would say, traditional associated with change management, right? This is about getting the people up the curve, right? How do you do that? And how do you influence at an organization level on a very large scale? And then finally, accountability. For many years, I know operational excellence and project people who, have talked about the sustainability of results. And the problem is you can put all the systems and process stuff in place that you want, but if you don't have individual personal accountability to keep the changes happening and keep the results flowing, they will stop, right? So I hope that as you look at these are sounding very different to you, related, but a couple of steps up from traditional change management, and that they solve the problems that a lot of change managers have, which is, I've got the tools, I've got the expertise, I've got the psychology, the human behavior background, no matter what discipline you come from. How comes I can't get the results I want, right? Something is still missing for me. And to me, these are those missing elements that haven't necessarily learned along the way, but are the key to helping you take these steps up. And so this is really the mandate, right? Coaching executives, getting yourself positioned so that your services can be used and you can get them saying and doing the right things. Now, I do acknowledge, not every executive is coachable. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about in one of the programs that I teach is, well, how do you know that? And the idea, though, is don't take too much accountability for yourself in implementation, right? The accountability belongs to the executive. The responsibility belongs to you. But as I said earlier, there's more runway. So how do you use more runway instead of just finding yourself saying, I'm on a major project and I have a bad sponsor. This is going to be tough all the way through, and we're going to be lucky if we ever get the behaviors that we need. Instead of thinking that way, thinking, hey, there may be, if I exercise my skills and think a little bit differently as an executive, as somebody who needs to be developed, there probably is more runway in terms of how I can develop this person. But then also knowing, when is that stop point, right? When are you at that point, and what are some of your options? Again, aligning leaders to make rapid decisions, really working across teams and network to help them design solutions and implement effectively. Get really good at influence and persuading through others. It's one thing for you to be doing that face to face, but how do you get other people to do it? Mobilizing people from a distance. Lots of people that when you're working on big initiatives, they are miles and countries away. And so what are the mechanisms that you need in place to influence people from very far away, and creating deep accountability to sustain results? So the people that I work with typically want to get to the next level. They're feeling stuck to some degree. They're not necessarily feeling like their work is respected, and they're saying, this is much harder than I thought. I went out and I got, a certification in change management, and the work just seems so darn hard. But by the same token, I don't really have time to learn anything new. So, what can I do to keep my career moving forward? And my answer to that is, I totally get that. It is not that easy to move up the curve and become a change leader. In fact, as I look at that continuum laying on its side, it's sort of a pyramid laying on its side. There are lots of people who are in ad hoc, lots of people in change management, and then as you move up and to the right, there are fewer of those people. But that's one of the reasons that your professional net worth goes up, right? Because when you start getting really capable and moving to the top and to the right, you get paid more, and you really start to become one of those go-to people. So it's not that easy for a couple reasons. So first, I have yet to see any single discipline identify these strategic engagement skills. You know, if you have an MBA, you've got great business know-how about what to do in a business. If you're a change lead, you've got a great toolkit. If you're a project management leader, you've got a great methodology. Operational excellence, similar. But it doesn't tell you the how. It tells you what you need to do. But the secret sauce is in how you do it, right? How do you use your judgment and your own decision making and decide how do you want to engage the organization? It makes a huge difference in the results you can get. No one ever really teaches you these things. So I did a study a couple of years ago, it was 2012 actually, and I said, where do you get your advice about change management and change leadership, right? Where do you get your information and advice from? And most people said, well, my boss is my last stop because I don't want to look like I don't know something, and I'm not sure that they have the skills. So that's usually my last stop. We do have consultants working in the organization, but the sentiment there was, I'm not necessarily sure that it's always in their vested best interest to teach me, to transfer knowledge to me, because it could cut short their assignment and they hold relationships and things like that. So the number one answer where people go to get their advice from are their peers. But here's the catch. Most people who said, and when we asked the question why, most people said because it's really safe to go to their peers. That was the plus. But the minus was, I don't know if they're just going out and Googling it. So I don't know if they know any more than me or not, but I feel like it's the safest place for me to go. And so you can see, if you don't really have a good source to learn these skills, it makes it kind of hard to do it. Plus, like most people, you probably don't have a lot of time or resources. Capability building is not naturally integrated into our work, right? There tends not to be a lot of time. And when we go to learn something, we go to a 2 or a 3 or a 5-day course, and we have to bring it back and integrate it. It's not naturally integrated into the work, right? So there's extra work to do after you learn. And the facts are that there's a lot of competition. Lots of people would like to be change leaders and increase their professional net worth. But I think the most challenging one on this list is that you may need to make some changes in how you think or in how you work. And we're all human beings, right? This is the path many of us least like to take, right? It's one thing to go out and learn, but to actually make adjustments in how we do things is more difficult. So these are some of the reasons why there's so few people at that level of the curve, but it's also why it's worth your time to become one. I spent years studying this. I moved very far up that curve myself. So that's not to say everything I learned will work for you, but I will tell you I've built a business around it, and that this is my niche. And I think it's that worthwhile that I built a company around it. So some time back, as I was sort of struggling with this myself, this had to be probably 15 years ago now, I was thinking, there's more that I want to do. I started out professionally as an HR business partner, and I was definitely suffering from some of the biases of being in that function. I felt very undervalued. I felt that my skills were, even though the company invested in me, I had all these skills that I couldn't come back and use, and it was extremely frustrating. And so I started thinking, is there something about my mindset or my skills that are keeping me stuck where I am? And for me, the answer was yes. And so I really set about, what is the approach that I need to take? And I did this just for myself, but I was in outsourcing. So I was going from customer to customer, client to client, huge projects over a period of more than 10 years. And, what started out as just an approach for myself actually turned into something that was teachable and repeatable. And this was part of what we used at Merck and part of what I use in my own business now. But the net for me is that when you improve your engagement skills, you get to work on these big projects that you love. You get to make more money. For me, doing something that makes a little dent in the universe is important, but also being able to do other things that are important to you. And so figuring this out was important to me, and I was able to get the benefits from that. And, what I want to say to you is if you're feeling in that place that you're like, geez, this work is so darn hard. I don't even know if I want to do this. I've learned all this stuff and I still feel like it's so hard. There is a formula, and every formula will not fit everybody perfectly. But I have to tell you, there's a finite set of things that you can learn. It's a good time as the bar is going up. Some people will be dropping out. New people will be entering the profession at lower levels. And if you look around, right, the time is right for people like us to really participate and contribute in a much more significant way. So the approach that I was telling you about, these strategic engagement skills, let me share with you where these came from. So my background is in IO Psych, as I mentioned. And so all the behavioral science is in here. But it's not in here in terms of theories, although they're all cited. I believe that most people, if they wanted to be behavioral scientists, would have done that in college. And I work with people across a variety of disciplines, including business executives and engineers and IT people and OD and change and HR and the like. So all the behavioral science is in here. And I've been using it for more than 15 years now, actually, in different industries, different companies, different types of environments. And it works across all of those. There are only 7 elements, so it's easy to remember. It's highly visual. 4 disciplines, so operational excellence and change execution and others. And it's like on a piece of paper, right? So it really kind of boils down all the influence stuff you need to do across the life cycle of change into something that you can actually use. And really, it answers the question, for wherever we are in this change, where should I be focusing my influence, right? And then we answer that question and help build the skills. So this is our approach to change at CSR, but that's not what's important. You could be using ProSci, you could be using AIM, you could be using Cotter, you could be using Connor. That's not what's so important to me, right? There is a relatively predictable cycle of change that human beings go through. So this is the what, right? All of us have learned some method for what we need to do. What I'm suggesting is that how we do it is what sets us apart from our colleagues. And that's where the strategic engagement skills come in. So in the early phases of the change, you're working with your sponsor, and it's about getting those clear metrics, the compelling future state, the story. You're working with a leadership team, and you need to get through those politics, and you need to get the prioritization and the decision-making rolling. It's working with teams, oftentimes through networks and matrices, and surfacing solutions that already exist in the organization instead of always designing something completely new. Here's where coaching comes in, right? Getting leaders midway down through the organization to be behaving in ways that are consistent with the change by using other people's authority, influence on your behalf. Really energizing and supporting people who are doing the change. And I take but slightly different view of traditional change management, in that I think that a lot of the engagement that needs to happen locally has to happen through dialogue, and it's very specific, close to being scripted dialogue. There are things that people need to hear from their manager, and a set of conversations they need to have. And there are things that people should not hear, things that we should avoid doing. And I think oftentimes we don't get to that level of granularity in change management, but in strategic engagement skills, we really need to help the managers have that dialogue. Even if their skills aren't so good, we need to prop them up and help them do that. And then the last one is accountability. So performance management is not the preferred way to manage accountability, despite the fact that it is so heavily used. New research is showing that it's probably one of the worst ways that we can drive accountability. Nevertheless, we need, as the project gets handed off, we need to have agreements in place to make sure that the business is going to get and sustain the results. And finally, as I said earlier, you are the person who, in this equation, who is working with all of these different groups, right? And so what if you're not in here? What if you're a little off to the side? What if your role isn't positioned well? What if what you do is not understood or valued? Who's going to help all these people play their role? right? Nobody. HR can try, they've got a little piece of it. Project leads can try, they've got a little piece of it. But it's people like us who are in strategy realization and change roles who really understand the human behavior side of the equation that need to figure out how to get themselves positioned in roles where they can exercise their influence and where they can provide feedback, mutual feedback to leaders, and have a working agreement in place that really is helping get the behavior that is needed, right? And so these are higher order skills than change management, right? These aren't things that we learn along the way. This is the how. But again, we may find ourselves in a position that we need a slightly different mindset and skills to be able to influence differently, and that's going to create some changes on our parts that we need to make. The other thing about strategic engagement skills is that when you have these, they're methodology agnostic. Again, it doesn't really matter whether you are working on a project whose sort of core approach is Sigma, right? Whether you're using DMAIC or DMADV or CDOV, or whether you're working with a PMO lead who is absolutely married to using the PMBOK approach. Okay, good, fine. And this could just as easily, as I said, Cotter's 7 steps or Connor's DDIS or any of the rest. It really doesn't matter. The idea here is that you are integrating these skills into whatever methodology you're given when you arrive in an organization. The other thing that's different about these, and the reason that they're depicted as a circle, is because human behavior is not that linear. Collective organizational behavior is not that linear. So oftentimes we go through a change, we'll get to a certain spot, leaders can't make decisions, they'll circle back, we find ourselves, we're trying to work in stage gates and say, well, now we don't have our sponsor agreement, we've got to go back to the beginning. And I'll tell you, one of my key learnings in organizations through the years is, as much as we like to bring rigor to human behavior, we're not going to accomplish that. And if we do, we will create resistance to our own approach. And so we need something that has some rigor, but that really is flexible and agile. And that's how the 7 engagement skills work, right? They're not a heavy methodology with these do not go past this stage gate unless you have completed every deliverable in this category. They look more like this. So for instance, if you're working with a sponsor on getting clear and telling an inspiring story, and you have a sponsor who's not very capable, you may find yourself working in long stretches with this sponsor over the course of the implementation until the handoff happens, right? On the other hand, or maybe you're pretty well positioned, right? You do some work around getting yourself positioned, and you've got to tap that a couple of times along the way and make sure you're still well positioned. But notice all the white space in here. These are all the things that you are not doing. And to me, even though you're sort of seeing how change plays out over time, right? There definitely is sort of a flow from beginning to end. What you're doing here is you're building in that ability to go back and go forward, right? Which is so important because the organization is not oftentimes willing for us to wait to check off every box that's necessary under a stage gate, right? Many times they're not needed, but junior practitioners in particular, you've heard the expression, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? They drive the organization crazy trying to get all these things put in place, whether or not they're critical to the implementation. And what this does is say, listen, part of these skills is about helping you build judgment, right? Testing some pulse points, assessing along the way to understand, hey, what do I need to be influencing next? What's popping for me right now? And the facts are, some of these are going to come up redundantly, right? You might have a sponsor who you need to work with indefinitely, right? Maybe throughout this whole implementation. But this also leaves room for the fact that you're going to free up time because you don't have to put everything into place all the time, right? And so I would encourage you to think about, how and when are you using your skills? Are you actually putting work into the organization by how you're working with them? Or are you reducing work? Are you working with them in an agile way and coaxing and cajoling your way, to get just what's needed at the time, so you can kind of move on to the next steps. And that really is how I like to think about it, right? It's much more sort of practical, real world way of thinking about it. And strategic engagement skills, just to kind of sum it up for you in a nutshell, lots of organizations work on this, right? Methodology, process, and tools. And I'm not saying those aren't important, because they are. You need to have some of those basics in place. The what, right? What are we going to do to deliver realization on these initiatives? Where I like to focus my attention is on the slightly more sophisticated skill set of, all right, having the what is important, but where we need to spend our time is talking about how. How are we going to engage people and leaders? How are we going to influence to get the behaviors that we need to get realization? How are we going to coach them, ask questions, help them come to their own conclusions, and work in a way that's really more aligned with the rhythm and cadence of the organization, so it doesn't feel so much like, we've still got the rigor, but it doesn't feel so much like we're introducing something that's countercultural, and that's going to create a lot of resistance. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. We have just about 10 minutes left or so. So I'm going to give you a quick summary, and then I'm going to talk about next steps. So as you heard, the bar is being raised on change capability. It's important for you, if you want to improve your professional net worth, to really think about how to move towards change leadership using those strategic engagement skills. So if you're thinking about coming to part 2, we would certainly love to have you. We're going to do, we've got more time in part 2. We have 90-minute sessions, so we're going to do some work in the room on applying the strategic engagement skills. First, I'm going to share with you a fact base. And when I say a fact base, what I mean is some business statistics that show how strategic engagement skills improve impact and how they influence project realization. And the reason that I think that you're going to get some value from these is because, when I was doing internal consulting work inside an organization, I never had time to go out and get this stuff for myself. And so when I was trying to justify doing some of these things to my senior leaders, I always felt like I was a little hamstrung by maybe not having some better facts. And so I put together a fact base of about 60 different references and some tidbits that I think for each of these could be helpful for you in your work. So we're going to go through the fact base. I'm going to share a white paper which contains a graphic assessment of how well you or your project are doing on these strategic engagement skills today. So in other words, have these been integrated into your work or not? And then finally, to understand, well, okay, if I want to actually do these in my work, are there some books I can read? Are there some actions to take to be able to go away and start using these things and increase my professional net worth at the same time? There I'll also talk a little bit about, at the end of the session, just for 5 minutes, about a program I offer called Strategic Engagement Skills for Professionals Leading Change. This really starts with a deep assessment of your strategic engagement skills individually. And then we spend 2 days on deeply going through the interaction and application of these engagement skills for you and your project, really with a focus on the hard stuff. Right? The things that they don't teach you in change management, right? What do you do when your sponsor tells you that you can't use any of these techniques? What do you do when there aren't any resources, right? Some of these big boulders that sometimes we have a hard time moving. And then, of course, sharing with you some of the done-for-you frameworks and guides and other things that come with the program. I work with a lot of clients from major corporations around the US and Canada predominantly, although I do have some European clients as well. And, just want you to get a sense that I think that there's a lot of uptake for the concept of how we actually do this change and realization work, as opposed to just sort of introducing more methodology. How do we use ourselves as instruments of the change to help get what we need from our leaders? And getting really some fantastic feedback. I mean, people tell me all the time, one of the goals of this program is about transforming yourself professionally. And I hear frequently that people really feel like they leave not thinking the same way about their projects or their role in that, or how they have been using their skills up to this point, and that they really felt like the insights were valuable. So if this resonates, let's discuss if it's right for you. There is a brochure on the website. There won't be a post-course email from you, as this is a re-record, but as I said, you can certainly pull that down off the website. And if you want to talk about it more, certainly feel free to email me or give me a call, and I would be glad to discuss with you whether this is the right path for you. So this is our program today, Change Leaders Guide. On the 21st will be the January Change Summit for the Minnesota Change Management Network, and we'll be spending 90 minutes to 2 hours together really going through the engagement skills more deeply and talking about the facts and how to use those to more effectively influence leader behavior. And there will be a networking session after that. If you would like to attend, I would love to see you there. The Change Management Network also asked me to let you know that professional development days in February are also coming. Tim Creasy from ProSci will be there on February 18th to talk about organization change management capability, on the 19th to talk about business case and creating a change scorecard. All right, so the 18th and 19th of February. And finally, thank you so much for coming today. I hope that the assessments got your wheels turning about the landscape in which you currently find yourself, where you're at within that, and the extent to which you might want to think about building a broader skill set around change leadership. So if you have a moment and you'd be willing to share some feedback or ideas on the program, always trying to make this program better for folks, and would love to hear it or meet you virtually. So if you are willing to share some feedback, I would love to hear it, and you can send it to support@centerforsr.com. So once again, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate your attention and interest, and I hope to see you at an upcoming webinar or live session soon. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Bye-bye now.